begin anyway. I won't waste any more of your time. Who's just held up, but there's further held up, so we will just begin anyway. I won't waste any more of your time. Thank you very much for coming. It is the anniversary of 10 years of WikiLeaks starting today, and this is the first showing of a video that we have for this.
Anyway, welcome to the State Department. I think we have some interns in the back. Welcome. Good to see you in this exercise in transparency and democracy.
A decade ago, we knew a lot less about the world's powerful leaders and institutions. We knew only what they wanted us to know.
Don't worry, be happy.
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 Don't worry, be happy. Don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy.
We didn't know how casually they broke the law or stitched up trade deals, how routinely they conducted mass surveillance or kidnapped, indefinitely detained, tortured, or even murdered people. But then,
the whistleblowing website WikiLeaks
is getting ready for a bombshell.
WikiLeaks? Julian Assange?
The guy ought to be, and I'm not for the death penalty, so if I'm not for the death penalty, I don't want to do it, illegally shoot the son of a
WikiLeaks.
WikiLeaks. I think the man is a high-tech terrorist.
Julian Assange founded WikiLeaks, a media organization unlike any other. In one decade, WikiLeaks has published more secret documents than all the rest of the world's media combined. WikiLeaks has published more than 10 million documents, more than 10 billion words. If you print them out, they would reach the center of the earth and then come out the other side. To celebrate WikiLeaks' birthday, here are the top 10 greatest hits, 10 publications that helped us all better understand. In 2007, WikiLeaks showed us inside Guantanamo Bay by publishing the manuals and standard operating procedures used to hide prisoners from the Red Cross, as well as PR guides used to eliminate certain words like suicide, or to rename a hunger strike as voluntary fasting. 500,000 documents make up the Iraq and Afghanistan war logs, the most detailed description of war to have ever been published. Each attack and death is listed, including 15,000 kills that had been kept secret from the public. When European oil company Trafigura dumped illegal toxic chemicals in the Ivory Coast, it convinced a British court to gag the BBC and The Guardian. WikiLeaks published the gag documents breaking the censorship ban. In 2010, WikiLeaks revealed how a US Apache helicopter killed 18 people, including 2 journalists and people in a van driving children to school. What shocked the world was the video game commentary of soldiers eager to kill.
Look at that, right through the windshield. Oh yeah, look at those dead bastards.
The children from the van were severely injured in the attack. Their father and the other adults in the van were killed.
The United States strongly condemns the illegal disclosure of classified information.
Later that year, WikiLeaks released over 250,000 secret US diplomatic cables about every country in the world. Cablegate exposed wrongdoing on every continent. WikiLeaks exposed the largest international agreements that the world has ever seen, the 3 big T's, which are being negotiated in secret. The 3 big T's are big businesses' new strategy to bypass the World Trade Organization and ensure that they get to set the international rules of what other countries can and cannot do.
Today, WikiLeaks begins its release of emails documenting the private lives and private lies of private spies.
WikiLeaks revealed the inner workings of private intelligence company Stratfor that provides advice to US government agencies, arms companies, and Dow Chemical, who hired Stratfor to spy on the victims of the largest chemical disaster in history caused by their plant in Bhopal, India. With the 2.3 million emails published in the Syria files, including the emails of its head of state Bashar al-Assad, WikiLeaks revealed the true nature of the Syrian elite. The Syria files also shed light on how Western companies profited from Syria by breaching sanctions. WikiLeaks revealed the US National Security Agency's spying on world leaders, including Chancellor Angela Merkel of Germany and the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, the last three French presidents, and President Berlusconi of Italy. Finally, coming in at number 10 are the emails of the US Democratic National Committee, which showed how the DNC undemocratically and illicitly stacked the deck against Bernie Sanders. As a result of those leaks, the DNC's 5 top heads rolled. For the 10 million documents published, and the 10 million more to come, let us all wish WikiLeaks a happy 10th birthday. To help WikiLeaks publish the next 10 million documents, go to wikileaks.org/donate.
Yeah, I suppose when you put it all like that, it's no wonder I feel a bit tired today. So yeah, 10 years. This day, 10 years ago, the domain wikileaks.org was registered. Since then, we've published over 10 million documents. That's over 10 billion words. That's more secret documents than the rest of the world's media combined. Sorry to everyone in the room. They cover information about every country on the world, and we've partnered to bring these revelations out with over 100 media organizations over the decade that we have been around so far. We're going to be celebrating over the next 10 weeks with new events being announced all the time, quite a number of supporter of activities that people can get involved in. We have promotions on our book, the WikiLeaks Files. This is the hardback copy, but the paperback is about to be launched. So yeah, there's a lot going out over these next 10 weeks on the sort of supporter community side. We actually have some quotes coming in, some happy birthday quotes. There's one that came in just this morning from Chomsky, which you might be interested in. He says, on our birthday, WikiLeaks has provided a unique and quite outstanding service to people of the world, bringing to them information that they should and deserve to have, and that has been illegitimately concealed by systems of power. So it all began 10 years ago with the concept of an online Dropbox that Julian Assange devised. This concept, we're very proud to say, has now become a lot more normalized and has spawned and is a number of media rooms around the world. The concept here was that there was a system that was possible to be built, that he did build successfully, that people could submit documents online. That means they could upload them and get them directly to a media organization anonymously. We are now on our second generation submission system. We relaunched it just over a year ago. It has become clear, as I'm sure all of you are aware, the NSA surveillance capabilities. We started understanding in quite a lot of detail about these capabilities back in 2010 with some of our releases there, and a lot more as we continued with spy files in 2011. And it became clear that a lot more parts were needed for our Dropbox to make it secure in this mass surveillance age. Also, we'd grown our area of expertise in the whole operational side of source protection. So there's some unique elements of our Dropbox. For example, the fact that the instructions can be read from every single page on the website. So we actually even mask who is even considering submitting a document. You can't even analyze the internet traffic to our site and see who might even be considering and wanting to understand the tools they'll need. So we've stayed at the top of our game on our Dropbox over the whole decade. And of course, our online Dropbox began netting leaks very, very early on. It was just a couple of months later that our first publication came through. And since then, they've just kept coming. We've had, for example, quite a lot on Guantanamo Bay. These began in 2007 with the standard operating procedures that came out then. These showed the regulations around torture, propaganda uses by the US government to try and cover up their illegal behavior within Guantanamo Bay. What happened with the Guantanamo files, we've noticed actually happens in quite a lot of areas, that when we start publishing, the impact that we go for, that we promise our sources, is very successful, and other sources of other information relating to that topic understand the expertise that we have in the area, that we've generated, the media partners ready to work on those topics, and often as a submission and a publication on one specific topic will net more on the same topic. So after we began in 2007 on Guantanamo, documents about Guantanamo Bay, we actually just continued to get more, and we've been publishing up until 2011. We still had some more on Guantanamo Bay. There's a number of these. We will be looking at every week over the 10-week period at different topics, themes or countries, and these stats and information will be coming out. Some other examples of some early on documents, there's a couple of interesting ones. German media, Focus magazine. Back at the 11th of August 2008, we released the missing pages of the Schaefer report into the illegal spying by German intelligence on the German press. The 2006 report, compiled by a former federal judge, investigated spying on journalists by Germany's BND, the secret intelligence service here, which is forbidden under German law. The missing pages contain detailed descriptions about the BND's contacts with Focus magazine. The code name Jerez for one of the journalists there was Huffelschulter, who was in contact with them quite a lot, which was shown through these documents. We also released just the year before that, in 2007, the Stasi files, showing that the Stasi was still in charge of these Stasi archives. Then we moved through and we started getting a new trend coming in 2010. We started getting a large lot of document sets that were large archives. We began quite famously in 2010, Collateral Murder. I joined the organization just after that, and I was part of one of the first of these large archives, the Afghan war logs, that we put out in 2010. That was over 90,000 reports from the war in Afghanistan, from the US troops on the ground there. This was the first time that a media organization was publishing such a large set of documents in this way. It was a first for us at that time, but has a trend that has just continued and has grown. A few months after that, we published similar reports from Iraq, 40,000. These showing, for example, one such revelation from these reports was that the US government would not be reporting a number of instances of torture abuse claims that were received. And then, later that year, 250,000 cables. These were diplomatic documents from the US State Department, and we began in 2010 with publishing 250,000 cables. This was a publication that ended up with 100 media partners. We were publishing for several months. This produced amazing results all around the world. A couple that show the impact. For example, the cables have been cited by Tunisian academics for having contributed significantly to the revolution in Tunisia. They also were one of the main bases for immunity being withdrawn in Iraq. The Prime Minister at the time explained that this was a reason, the information in the cables, for them taking away immunity for US troops. And there's an interesting case which really showed us and started to develop our publishing model that we have been finessing over the last several years. And what we realized with Cablegate was that actually if one is just working with media, and as much as that does help on an impact side initially, there is a huge impact for archives. The very nature of them, of people being able to explore full archives and see trends in documents, is not only allows for more stories and information to get out that wouldn't otherwise be picked up by media, but is actually very empowering for the public. There was a case specifically that showed us that if we just allowed waiting for headlines, then the stories that all deserve to come to the forefront wouldn't necessarily. There's a German citizen, Khaled El-Masri. He happens to have the same name as a suspected terrorist, and he had been, while he was on holiday in Macedonia, kidnapped by the CIA, secretly renditioned, tortured, and then after several months after they discovered that actually they had the wrong person, he just happened to have the same name, the CIA just sort of dumped him out on the road, and he had terrible trouble trying to get a court case up. The US just said he had no standing, there was no documentation about the secret rendition, etc., etc. In the end, although partners did not pick up those cables to publish them initially, when we put out the entire set of Cablegate unredacted, he was able to go through, him and his legal team, they found the documents that were actually able to get them, and they were able to use them in the ECCHR case that he took that was eventually successful. And this really started to show us the value of publishing these full archives, not just searchable, but the full archives so that the public can interact with them. And this is something that we've kept on with doing, and you will know a number of our more recent releases, the DNC emails, Hillary emails, etc. We are keeping with this, having understood the value of publishing full large archives. Of course, for this, we got quite a number of attacks. The biggest and most interesting for me that we get, obviously we get DDoS attacks, and technically people try to take us down. We're very successful and always have been at staying online. We don't unpublish documents, our links aren't broken. But the one that was most interesting to me are the propaganda attacks that we get. And we've been living with these for several years. The first one that we were hit with when I joined was the blood on your hands with the Iraq war logs, which I found just incredible even at the time. We were literally publishing the deaths at their hands of tens of thousands of people, and somehow this was turned around that because we explained to the world that the US were knowingly doing this, we somehow had blood on our hands, which of course is not true at all. And what was interesting with this story that still is occasionally repeated, although predominantly people have come to understand that it is just based on a bunch of lies, was that actually this point was brought up in the trial of Chelsea Manning. And the US government tried very hard to try and show in that trial that there had been any harm done from any of these publications. This was something they wanted to use against Manning and, of course, Julian and WikiLeaks. And what was interesting was that the US government themselves, despite having successfully brought up this talking point, were actually able to find no evidence of harm. And you can see some of the quotes here, and it became very clear in the trial that actually even the US government don't have any facts to back up their point. And we've seen these sorts of propaganda attacks continue. We're going through quite a large one at the moment. Doesn't surprise us at all. We've also come to understand quite a large trend with these propaganda attacks, that every time we're about to publish, or we're publishing large things, or we're in the middle of a big investigative partnership with a large archive that's coming out, and it's very clear in the power that this is coming, and the powers that be, or the organization that we are publishing about, whose lies and secrets we are revealing, does start in this big propaganda spin against us. And so with the large amount of documents that are clearly coming, that Julian has made a few small references to recently, and of course some have come out, the DNC emails, etc. Of course, as is usual for us, a large spin machine went into play against us, and there have been, it seems, quite some digging through past publications. There really is, it seems to me, quite a concerted attack to go in through and just try and find anything. Of course, as is usual, when you start to pick them apart, none of these actually work. I'll just look at a couple of them now that have come out recently, just to easily falsifiable and based on no facts, so just spin. And it is interesting to me that it is all happening at this time where clearly we are at quite a height of publication. So for example, Russian agents. I'm apparently a Russian spy. We don't publish anything on Russia. Apparently it's a bit too difficult to Google WikiLeaks Russia and see the 2.3 million emails that we've put out exposing Assad's regime, because apparently we were not publishing on Russia and Syria, or the 650,000 documents that we've published on Russia. That was apparently a bit too difficult to fact check. What's another good one we've had recently? Oh yeah, the Turkish one. Oh, this was funny. Yeah, so then there was a big hoopla online because apparently we'd published some data on Turkish women and everybody was getting very upset and it was personal, etc., etc. The most amazing lack of fact-checking here. What was being referred to was not even anything that we'd published. And in fact, the person that did publish it actually stated that it wasn't us, that they'd published it and they had now removed it after this criticism. But apparently, well, we'll just ignore the tweet, we'll just ignore people explaining they published it. No, we'll attribute it completely falsely to WikiLeaks and try and get up this spin. So for us, these sorts of attacks are quite interesting. It's interesting to see the type of reaction and spin one gets. As I say, these are always, we've seen the trend, it is a reaction from an organization or entity that we are publishing about. They are bringing it up in defense, and so it is actually interesting for us generally to see the types of attacks, the type of spin and propaganda that is tried to be worked up, because this actually tells us even more about the organization, interestingly enough, that we were revealing about in the first place. So yeah, as long as journalists are willing to not fact check, we're willing to do it afterwards. And we've learned that the main lesson through this is through these propaganda attacks is just keep publishing. We publish real documents, true documents, source documents. They speak for themselves. The public can interact with them themselves, and that is, and always has been, and is now 10 million or 10 billion, depending on if you prefer words or documents, that many times that we have been proven correct on this. And so we will keep publishing. It has been 10 years and 10 million documents so far, and there are a lot more coming. We've got Julian will be speaking a bit more about that in a second. But right now, we're just going to hear from one of our media partners briefly. The other one was due to be joining us, John Getz. Sadly, he's been held up. Oh, no, he's here. Just at the last minute. Grand entrance, hey, John. I know your game. Stefania and John, if you'd like to come and join me. So John Getz is a German journalist here, and Stefania has come from Italy, and they're just going to say a few words about working with WikiLeaks as media partners.
Me? Okay. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, good. So, good morning. I'm here not because I have special wisdom. I'm a journalist like you. I just want to share my experience of 10 years of WikiLeaks. I spent the last 7 years partnering with WikiLeaks, working on all their releases, from the Afghan war logs to the latest releases. So I have quite a lot of experience. And so... Your name, please, sorry, Stefania Maurizzi, and it'll also be on the slide at the end, and it should be in, if you've got one of these packs, it should be there, but Stefania... Yeah, Stefania Maurizzi. Yes, I'm working. But yeah, it'll be on the slide at the end, Stefania Maurizzi. I'm working for the Italian news magazine L'Espresso and the Italian daily La Repubblica. So basically, it all started in 2007 when one of my high-value sources was basically destroyed, had very serious consequences just for contacting me, just for trying to contact a journalist. So at that point, I realized that the well-established techniques to protect sources we journalists use are no longer working. We need something better. So I'm a mathematician. Before journalism, I got a degree in mathematics. So I have good sources in cryptography. And one of my high-level sources in cryptography told me, well, you should have a look on that bunch of lunatics. And the lunatics were the WikiLeaks guy. WikiLeaks had just been established, so very, very few people knew about even the name of WikiLeaks. So that top-level source in cryptography put WikiLeaks on my radar screen. And I started looking at this organization, their work, how they were publishing things, how they were basically operating, and I got very interested in their methods and in their approach to journalism, because it was a good approach, a very different approach to journalism. And suddenly, in 2009, one night in July 2009, at 3 a.m. in the morning, someone called me, "We are WikiLeaks." Okay. Could you please get up and go to your computer, because we have a file, and you need to get this file before it is too late. Please go to your computer, and could you please help to verify the authenticity of this file? So I went to the I accessed this file and realized that it was very important. It was a file about the garbage crisis in Naples. Probably you know this crisis because it hit the headlines around the world. And it was basically the alleged role of the Italian secret services in this crisis. So at that point, I realized their methods. I realized how they were operating. Though at that time I knew very little, and I started tracking them down, trying to understand who they are, how they work. And that was in 2009, when people had no knowledge about WikiLeaks. From 2009, I basically started partnering with WikiLeaks on all their releases, working on each of the releases. And I could tell you some good paranoia stories about the paranoia of getting fake documents. But I could tell you also, tell you a very good story about tough journalistic work for verifying these documents and try to put them in a context, getting good stories, because this is what journalism is about: verifying documents, finding angles, finding stories, and make these stories accessible to the large public. And when you go to the court, when you get libel cases about this story, well, you have to be sure you publish very good and absolutely genuine documents, because you go to the court and you risk personally, you and your newspaper, of course. And we went to the court and we won the case when we got libel cases about our WikiLeaks releases. Well, I could tell you how important. I mean, it was thanks to WikiLeaks documents that we were able to learn what happened behind the scene of the story, the Italian story. Actually, it is an international story. You probably know the extraordinary rendition of the Milan cleric Abu Omar. Abu Omar was kidnapped in Milan, and basically Italy is the only country which nailed the CIA agents involved in this rendition. And thanks to WikiLeaks cables, we were able to understand what happened behind the scene, how the US government tried to put pressure on the Italian prosecutors, in the Italian politicians, in order not to have this case going ahead in the court. And I could tell you what happened with the Syria files when we discovered the Italian arms giant Finmeccanica selling this communication equipment, military equipment, to the Assad regime. And in that case, we got a libel case. So we got a major libel case, but we were able to win because documents were true, documents were genuine. We had done a good work, and WikiLeaks had done a good work revealing these documents, revealing a story which would have been inaccessible without the WikiLeaks document. Finally, if you check the latest UN report on Sudan, if you check the latest UN report on Sudan, you probably know that Sudan is one of the countries which is under embargo by the UN. There is an arms embargo. And the UN inspectors, actually, the UN experts, go there, travel to Sudan, and check whether this embargo is well respected, whether there are violations, whether sanctions are needed. So if you check this latest document, which was published the 22nd of September, you will see how the UN inspector uses WikiLeaks documents to expose companies selling this military equipment to the Sudanese regime. So you will understand how even the UN rely on these documents published by WikiLeaks. And this report was basically released 1 week ago after apparently Russia tried to stop its publication. So in that case, no one said, well, WikiLeaks revealed some document, but Russia didn't want to reveal. No one said anything, but the documents are used by the UN expert, and it was important to expose the companies violating the embargo, the UN embargo against Sudan. So that's why I keep working on the files, I keep working on the releases, because they bring these important documents which would be inaccessible otherwise. Thank you.
My name is John Getz, and I work for the NDR and for the Süddeutsche Zeitung. There was some misunderstanding, I think, in some of the announcements that I work for WikiLeaks or something like that. That's not true. Just want to make that very clear. I'm a journalist that works for NDR and for the Süddeutsche Zeitung. And I was asked just to kind of talk about, my experience over the years working with WikiLeaks. And it first began with the Afghan war logs and the Iraq war logs and the diplomatic cables when I was working at Der Spiegel. And it's continued today in my capacity where I work now. And we've worked with WikiLeaks on some of the releases. We haven't done all of the releases. There've been, and basically we look at each release at a time, and we look to authenticate and look at the value of the publication, and then we decide based on that example if we're going to go ahead or not. And it just, when I look back at the last 6 years that it's been for me, it's very interesting how I came very naive about encryption, about the safety of emails, the safety of downloading documents. I remember at the time I found all of that stuff completely irritating, and like, why are they wasting my time? These are really, really difficult people who seem to take joy in making my life as a journalist difficult. And that was really how it felt like to me. Do you know what I mean? And they were constantly harping on this whole security thing. And it was very interesting how now in the last 6 years that my attitude about that's really changed. A lot of it had to do through the work of WikiLeaks, but also, of course, what came out with Edward Snowden later on, that a lot of the things that they had been telling me that I thought that were brain dead were not brain dead. So that was one thing. And there was also just one other thing I wanted to mention, that I did a lot of work on the Khalid al-Masri kidnapping case that Sarah had mentioned earlier, before WikiLeaks had been involved in it. And there was actually, there actually still is an arrest warrant today from a German state prosecutor for the 13 CIA men who had kidnapped Khalid al-Masri. The Munich state prosecutor has an ongoing arrest warrant. And one of the great things for me in my work as a journalist was to see through WikiLeaks documents released by WikiLeaks, the shadows of my work as a journalist in the government, and how the U.S. government, put pressure on the Chancellery about the stories that we were working on at the time, to see how the Justice Ministry, there was pressure on them, and to see kind of actually how politics works. And it, for me, was just, and it remains one of the most interesting insights of that time. So If people want to know later on, I'm happy to talk to anyone individually about what it's been like to be a journalist who works with WikiLeaks sometimes, and yeah, so that's...
Does anybody have any sort of questions on working with us and our partnerships or anything like that John and Steph could answer? No? No? We're all good.
We have
Okay.
it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah?
So I'm Andrea Shalal with Reuters, but how do you, from WikiLeaks perspective, how do you decide which media organizations you work with? Do you have a sort of a stable, do you send the information out, and then as John is indicating, the media have a choice, decide yes or no, we're not going to work on that? I mean, how do you decide that, and how did you do that at the very beginning, I imagine?
Yeah, so we'd had some media partnerships for some smaller size publications before Cablegate. In the summer we had with the Afghan war logs, for example, a sort of smaller size one than we then came to have with about 3 or 4 partners. And as we rolled out Cablegate, essentially what it was that as we would start to publish the cables to do with a certain region or country, we would basically analyze the media in that country and look at who had the best investigative teams, and would therefore do justice to the material. Often we got more than one in each country. We actually discovered, working with some media that stories will on purpose be missed because of a political bias of the editorial of a paper. So we would often actually get multiple media in a country, which in itself, how that worked, often ended up quite an interesting exercise in itself of what one would miss and one would get, or miss on purpose. And then going forward, we've then built up this very strong partnership with over 100 around the globe. And so if there's documents relevant to a particular country or a particular interest in there, then we will approach the media partners that we have there already, and if there's an area where we don't have, although we're getting very few countries now in the world where we don't have good media partners, but if not, then we'll do the same process of analysing and deciding, and then there's a bit of a process of teaching the security tools and how to work in a secure way with the documents, so there is a bit of lead-in time, but that's how. And then when a publication comes along, again, same analysis, who will be the best media partners, what type of is our ideal partnership, and then we go and approach those people. Okay. So through all of this, through all of these publications, we've had, yes, the propaganda attacks, but also some legal attacks against us as well. This began obviously in 2010 with the banking blockade. We've been working hard against that to not only get the blockade dropped, but to actually get some justice for it. Obviously, for an organisation that relies off donations, when we were publishing hundreds of documents a day, to not have that revenue stream coming in was quite debilitating for a while, but we pushed on through. We have managed to predominantly successfully defeat the banking blockade. We've won court cases against Visa and MasterCard, and we're in the damages phase of that. So hopefully over the next few months and year there will be some updates on that case, but we are being successful as that progresses. We've then, of course, had a lot of surveillance, electronic, some of it mass surveillance, and some of it obviously targeted. Julian Assange is in an embassy where, although there was several months ago, the Met Police did put out a statement that they were taking away their overt surveillance, they did state that they were going to be upping the covert surveillance. Sorry, I thought that was a question. Sorry to pause. But yeah, so I had a particular interaction with some of the U.S. grand jury case against us and the surveillance that we get. A couple of Christmases ago, I got a lovely Christmas present from Google, where they sent me finally, after having been keeping it secret for 2 years, they sent me the subpoena that they'd had on my emails. Now, it was interesting that this was a private email account before I joined WikiLeaks, so this really goes to show the dragnet nature of the investigation in the United States that Melinda will talk more about in a second. And just before she comes on, I just sort of want to say that we've really seen with the grand jury in the US from a member of staff that this is really, we can see that it is trying to get our boss, our editor-in-chief, Julian Assange, but it's quite worrying for all of us as members of staff that they're willing to go to these lengths, where my private emails, you know, with my family, etc., were caught up in this dragnet surveillance to try and get Julian on criminal codes such as espionage, conspiracy to commit espionage, Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. These are all very serious crimes in the United States. And this is on top of something I just want to illustrate now because I think it shows it quite well. This sort of surveillance and these sorts of secret legal threats that the US government has been, or the US has been making against us, have also come from a number of government officials in quite a personal way ever since 2010 they began.
High-tech terrorists.
Cyber terrorists, information terrorism.
Shut it down.
We're going to hang you.
Use a drone or something.
Aborting the brain. Illegally shoot the son of a...
Information warfare is warfare, and Julian Assange is engaged in warfare. Information terrorism, which leads to people getting killed, is terrorism, and Julian Assange is engaged in terrorism. He should be treated as an enemy combatant. WikiLeaks should be closed down permanently and decisively.
Should the United States do something to stop Mr. Assange?
We're looking at that right now. The Justice Department is taking a look at that. I would argue that it's closer to being a high-tech terrorist than the Pentagon Papers.
This disclosure is not just an attack on America's foreign policy interests. It is an attack on the international community.
The head of WikiLeaks is not a particularly credible source in my mind. He is a, in my mind, he's a criminal, and he ought to be hunted down and grabbed and put on trial for what he has done here.
I think the man is a high-tech terrorist. He's done an
Assange.
Yeah. He needs to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and if that becomes a problem, we need to change the law.
Well, I think Assange should be assassinated, actually. I think Obama should put out a contract and maybe use a drone or something.
You don't want to act panicked and have the
Well, you don't have to act panicked. You can act tough and say, if we catch you, we're going to hang you.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
We heard some of that from Holder.
Julian Assange is a cyber terrorist in wartime. He's guilty of sabotage, espionage, crimes against humanity. He should be killed.
How is it that the WikiLeaks guy remains free? You know, back in the old days when men were men and countries were countries, this guy would die of lead poisoning from a bullet in the brain, and nobody would know who put it there.
The way to deal with this is pretty simple. We got special ops forces. I mean, the dead man can't leak stuff. This guy's a traitor, a treasonous, and he has broken every law of the United States. The guy ought to be, and I'm not for the death penalty, so if I'm not for the death penalty and want to do it, illegally shoot the son of a...
It's time that the Obama administration treats WikiLeaks for what it is, a terrorist organization whose continued operation threatens our security. Shut it down. Shut it down. It is time to shut down this terrorist organization, this terrorist website, WikiLeaks. Shut it down, Attorney General Holder.
So yeah, they're quite serious threats there coming from some very official people in the US. It's also came out just in the last couple of days that actually these sorts of comments came from Hillary Clinton's mouth as well, where she in a meeting questioned whether he could be droned or not. So to explain a little bit more about the current status and any updates of this US case, we have one of Julian's lawyers here, Melinda Taylor. She's a criminal lawyer at the ICC, and she led the UN case that we had just recently. Melinda.
Hi, everyone. This year, the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention issued a landmark decision finding that Julian was a victim of illegal and arbitrary detention. They further found that the circumstances of his detention violated his right to protection from torture and cruel treatment. They found that Sweden and the United Kingdom had a duty to ensure his protection and security. This decision concerned the legal responsibilities of the UK and Sweden, and they were jointly responsible for keeping him in detention. But it was clear from the subtext of the decision that there was a larger villain lurking in the background. Indeed, in an email from the Crown Prosecution Services to their Swedish counterpart, it was underlined that, please do not think that this case is being dealt with as just another extradition request. And why was that? It's because the long arm of the US had reached out to its allies and indicated that it wanted Assange by any means possible. As a result, it's the ever-present risk of being carted off to face an unfair and abusive prosecution in the US that forms the bars that keeps Julian indefinitely detained. The complex legal decisions and actions that have given rise to this indefinite detention can be distilled to a few simple and irrefutable facts. There is an ongoing national security prosecution of both Julian and WikiLeaks. It is the largest investigation under the Espionage Act in US history, and it is the largest cybersecurity prosecution in the US Army. This prosecution has already given rise to several legal abuses and mistreatment. Chelsea Manning was interrogated in relation to both Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. The UN Special Rapporteur on Torture found that the interrogation methods applied to her amounted to torture. As Sarah mentioned, in 2012, the Department of Justice issued secret subpoenas to Google to obtain email accounts with private, personal, privileged information, and there was barely a whimper of protest before they were given up. On 28th of January 2015, a spokesperson for the Eastern District of Virginia confirmed that the criminal investigation into Julian is ongoing, and the risk presented by this prosecution has only grown in the last few years. Mr. Assange was and is a thorn in the side of US politicians who would prefer that their dirty secrets and mistakes are hidden from the very people who have the power to either elect or dismiss them. The inability to view Julian or WikiLeaks with any level of impartiality has just been emphasized by the recent smear campaign caused by the DNC leaks. Once again, the spectre of Reds under the beds has been resurrected. Just because WikiLeaks dared to publish information, for example, about Hillary Clinton's policy failings and her short-sighted and flawed approach to international interventions, for example, in Libya. He published this, therefore he must be anti-American. He must be an enemy of state. They don't see him as a publisher. They see him as an enemy combatant who must be brought to heel by any means possible. Julian has even been placed on an NSA man-hunting list, along with other members of terrorist organizations. And as Sarah mentioned, there was reports that came out recently that Hillary Clinton, in a meeting, proposed to just drone the guy. And while this has been going on, both Sweden and the United Kingdom have refused to give any assurances that he won't be handed over to the US if he were to go to Sweden. And of course they hide behind technical reasons for their refusal. Oh, we haven't received a formal request from the US for his extradition. Or we can only give him an assurance that he won't be given to the US after he leaves the embassy and after he comes to Sweden. It's just like the big bad wolf is outside the doors of the Ecuadorian embassy. He's trying to huff and puff and blow it down. And now he's trying to convince Julian to leave. Come out, Julian. I might be chomping on a Chelsea Manning sandwich. That might be Edward Snowden in a frying pan behind me, but you'll be safe if you come. And so the stalemate continues. Julian remains detained because the UK and Sweden continue to flout their international obligations and their duty to protect him from this risk. But even though Julian has been locked up, they haven't been able to silence him or WikiLeaks. Over the last 5 years, whilst Julian was detained, WikiLeaks has continued to publish key information that has changed the world. Without WikiLeaks, this information would have remained unknown or obscured, but it has now empowered people throughout the world to know where the perimeters of responsible government ends and the shadowy outlines of Big Brother commences. WikiLeaks documents are not curated, culled, or pieced together to support a particular political narrative, and as a result, they show both sides of the coin. As an example, it was the detailed minutiae of corruption and excesses that were set out and leaked to US diplomatic cables that acted as a catalyst for the Arab Spring. But the diplomatic emails and cables leaked by WikiLeaks were also instrumental in revealing the political machinations that both preceded and accompanied the NATO intervention in Libya. For example, one can see in Hillary Clinton's emails that she was aware of the profile of Saif Gaddafi as a potential reformer. She was aware of potential peace plans that could have avoided further civilian casualties. The US were aware, even later, that if he was tried in Libya, it would be inevitable that he would be given the death penalty. Nonetheless, all of this was avoided or ignored because of the political calculus between securing oil contracts as compared to protecting civilian lives. So these documents have had a range of repercussions in a range of areas. They're used by both the Victims' Council and Defence Council international courts and tribunals. And that is because they help to establish the truth. Truth might be a universal value, but it's a rare commodity. Not everyone has equal access to authentic evidence. If you're a sitting head of state or a head of a multinational corporation, often you can conjure up documents at a minute's notice. But if you're a human rights defender, a political opponent, or a dissenter, it's very hard to get access to evidence to help prove claims or protect your rights. But by making troves of authentic documents freely available, WikiLeaks has leveled the legal playing field. Thanks to WikiLeaks, you don't have to be a government crony or an insider to get information concerning, for example, the collateral murder of civilians and journalists in Iraq, mistreatment of detainees in Guantanamo Bay, US spying on foreign diplomats, unfair and unbalanced trade agreements. Today's event has been convened to mark the 10th year anniversary of the registration of WikiLeaks. These 10 years have transformed the notion of democracy and human rights. Because of WikiLeaks, people throughout the world have the power to know what is being done, why it's being done, and by whom it's being done. Through this knowledge, they can more fully participate in the world they live in and protect their rights. I would like to thank Julian.
WikiLeaks found the UN decision, just so that you can get the wording of that Melinda was just referring to. This is the announcement of it.
Julian Assange has been arbitrarily detained by Sweden and the United Kingdom since his arrest in London on 7 December 2010 as a result of the legal action taken against him by both governments. The expert panel called on the Swedish and British authorities to end Mr. Assange's deprivation of liberty. I think the recommendation is quite clear. Respect his physical integrity and freedom of movement, and afford him the right to compensation.
And despite that UN ruling that came several months ago, Julian is still in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, although hopefully via video to us right now. These things never work just as they're meant to, huh?
What, please?
We heard that, Julian.
All right, that's great.
Wait, hold on. You're just a random voice, sort of weirdly echoing, sort of in an omnipresent fashion down to us.
Come on, Scotty.
Maybe if they press all up.
Okay, we're just sorry for the delay. We're just sorting that out for just a couple of seconds. Does anybody have a question from the legal side whilst we're just trying to set that up that Melinda might be able to answer? Yes.
We talked a lot about the threats that you've been facing. I just wanted to ask about yesterday, why this announcement wasn't made from Assange's balcony. You talked about security threats. Can you elaborate on them?
I don't know if you want to make sort of a general comment. I would say that on the specific announcement, so sort of, I know it sounds a bit bad, but it's a bit of a get-out clause, but obviously the nature of sort of a security issue for him is one that we can't really go into too much. Oh, we've got him, sorry. Happy birthday.
Thank you. This is Truth, not Ruth, actually. I actually didn't hear much of what went on because you need to be close to the mic that's connected to the computer system. But, okay, so I understand we're in the Volksbringer, and to thank the Volksbringer for again for letting us use that space. It's a quite important place here in Berlin. Okay, so let me get my notes and we'll begin. We have about 20 minutes, is that right? We're running a little over time. No? But,
yeah.
I'll try and cut it to 15 so we have time for questions. Over the last 10 years, WikiLeaks has released 10 million documents comprising of 10 million words. And why numbers are not everything, they're a start. That information that never would have existed in the world had we not released it. It would have been stored away somewhere privately, but it wouldn't have become part of our collective civilizational knowledge. And it corresponds to approximately 3,000 documents a day on average. That's a hell of a lot of work. That's why we don't release every single day. We do things at scale in order to, release 100,000 documents at once. But it does pan out to about 3,000 documents per day. Now, why do this at all? I am in a position where I've been detained without charge here in the UK in one form or another, prison, house arrest, the last 4 years in the embassy. As a result of this work, some of our sources, or alleged sources, have suffered terrible consequences in the United States. Actually, not many. We have thousands, and there's only a couple of alleged sources that are facing difficulty, but altogether, being sources and supporters, people have been sentenced to something like 50 years altogether. And the two most significant cases is that of Chelsea Manning in the United States, sentenced to 35 years in prison, purely for communicating with the media. That's the allegation. There's no other allegation against them. The United Nations found that they had been tortured, subject to cruel and inhumane treatment akin to torture. Jeremy Hammond, imprisoned in New York for 10 years. And a number of Supporters back in the heat of the kind of first phase of neo-McCarthyist hysteria in the United States in 2010, 2011, went through a legal process as well. Most of them got off without any imprisonment. But, okay, what does it teach you? Well, it teaches you something about the structure of power. Whenever WikiLeaks engages in a release, sure, the information that we reveal about an institution or about a state is interesting. But also the reactions by the institution of the state are extremely revealing, and the reactions by tertiary players, such as particular media groups and their alignment, allied institutions, and so on. I mean, this in some ways harkens back to the old statement of Voltaire that if you want to understand structure of power, you should see who it is that you have difficulty writing about. Well, myself, my staff, and our sources, we believe in some kind of romantic ideal. It's quite a quaint notion. It's quite a cynical notion. It's quite a notion, in fact, that perhaps in some ways doesn't belong to this time. It belongs to an older time, or perhaps a future time, which is that through understanding the world, we can do something sane. We can do something rational. It's not something of coming out of a postmodernist view of extremely bounded rationality, where everything is kind of pointed. We actually think it's fascinating to understand the world around us, and through this understanding, we can see justice come from it, as we have in many cases, some of which Sarah has pointed out. In fact, you can break down this quest for knowledge and understanding into really the three types of history. By history, journalists will understand that I don't mean what happened 100 years ago, or not only what happened 100 years ago. I mean history circa now, the history that is unfolding all around us. What are the three types? So type one is the history which is subsidized, where there is economic interest in propelling it and promoting it. That of course includes all kinds of advertising and propaganda, but it also includes very basic things, such as how to hammer in particular types of nails, how to build a pump, how to fly an airplane. Extremely important information, but one that has an existing industry propelling it forth into the world. Type 2 history. And this is unsubsidized history. History which has lost its economic subsidy. Knowledge which is no longer fulfilled in the world, but sits there and perhaps slowly decays. That's important to try, in some cases, to drive that knowledge, but generally speaking, it's not kept around because people don't find it interesting enough to keep around. And then there's the type 3 history, and that is the type that WikiLeaks is involved in, and that I have been interested in all my adult life. And that is subjugated history. It is the history where there is an active effort to prevent it entering the world. And this type of history, if we can find it, if we can grab hold of it, if we can pull it in to civilization and our collective memory, this is a type of history that would not have otherwise existed. That's true for nearly every document published. It would not have otherwise existed as something to be discussed by people of different languages and different cultures. A good example of that is, say, the Iraq or Afghan war logs. That's a rich documentation of the history of a war, and in fact the history of two countries that would not have otherwise being present for the people of those countries or for the other countries that were embroiled in those wars to understand and derive lessons from. So through collecting this type of knowledge, subjugated history, we have built this romantic ideal of a grand rebel library. That's what WikiLeaks is. A rebel library, a type of library of Alexandria. I think we probably have more documents than Alexandria, but it is a library that is not like any other library. We have the first moment of what we bring into the world being present, as opposed to copies of other books, which might be interesting, but we're in the quest of trying to find original documents that have never been seen before and bringing them into our collective knowledge understanding. Okay, so Sarah has spoken about some of the technical details and a bit about practical history. I want to speak now about some of the things we're doing going forward, the future of WikiLeaks. Well, I know this. I've seen the internet, and I understand that there's enormous expectation in the United States. But some of that expectation will be partly answered, but you should understand that if we're going to make a major publication in relation to the United States at a particular hour, we don't do it at 3 a.m. That's something so we have a great many upcoming publications. Now, WikiLeaks has grown into a relatively strong position. We're a publishing organization that has no debts, has never had to fire anyone, is entirely funded by our readers, has succeeded in every litigation that it's been involved in. I think that puts us in an enviable position of being completely independent, not being dependent on dodgy foundations or advertisers or state funds or exceedingly wealthy benefactors, which of course always have their own interests. But nonetheless, the material that WikiLeaks is going to publish before the end of the year is of a significant moment, such a significant moment in different directions, affecting three powerful organizations in 3 different states, as well as, of course, information previously referred to about the US electoral process. But WikiLeaks needs to change in order to survive and thrive through the next few months. Now, why we have been growing and while we are in a position to, and I expect to be able to build up to about 100 additional journalistic staff over the next 2 years, we are going to need an army. Not an army, of course, engaged in physical hostilities, but we are going to need an army to defend us from the pressure that is already starting to arrive. That pressure is being placed on a number of elements that are close to us. It is being placed in one way or another on the state that has courageously given me asylum. It will not succeed. There will be consequences for it. If necessary, of course, if I am not able to continue or the Ecuadorian people are unreasonably blamed for WikiLeaks publications, I will have to resign as editor, but our publications will continue. So part of the necessary defense of WikiLeaks, we have engaged in a new project to recruit people across the world to defend our publications. And we'll give details of that as the weeks go by, but immediately you can start following on Twitter WL Task Force, that at WL Task Force, or twitter.com/WL Task Force, and Community WL. Follow those, and we will issue guidelines about how you can promote WikiLeaks publications, prevent their censorship, and we will also give, if necessary, effective call to arms if the pressure increases a lot more than it already has, which I expect almost certainly that it will. What else? The funding model of FAS is a very interesting model. FAS is a German newspaper, and it's something that we have been working on for a while. WikiLeaks will soon launch a membership system where we will give voting rights in relation to 20% of the discretionary expenditure we have. It's important to keep us independent and keep a sustained and predictable income as opposed to significant income coming from the times of publication, but in the times of between publications where there's extensive litigation, then the funding is more unpredictable, which is a difficult position to be in if you're in the middle of litigation. Okay, on upcoming journalism, because we have so many publications due before the end of the year, we're in both an enviable position and also in a very difficult position of having more than 1 million documents to get through of many different sources. We need to increase our number of press partnerships. We have about 110 different organizations over the years. I think there's about 89 that are active at the moment. I think Sarah might have displayed them before. But we need to increase the number, especially in the United States. So journalists that are interested in taking one angle or another on upcoming publication and getting embargoed access, you do need to be a publication which has significant impact. Write to press@wikileaks.org and tell us what your circulation is and what your medium is and what your subject matter expertise is. We have a book which has just come out, that is the WikiLeaks Files. It is out now in the United Kingdom. It is 40% off this week at Verso. If you just Google Verso WikiLeaks Files and search for it some other way, that's a free book, and it's available by ebook as well. We have another book coming out later this year. These two books, which I've written here in the embassy, one about Google and one about cypherpunks, how cryptography permits journalists and others to protect themselves from mass surveillance. Look at that. It must be the green. Okay. Now, upcoming publications. We hope to be publishing every week for the next 10 weeks. Now, we have on schedule, and it's a very hard schedule, all the US election-related documents to come out before November 8th. Our upcoming series include significant material on war, on arms, on oil, on Google, on the US election, and on mass surveillance. So journalists who are interested in those subjects, please write to press@wikileaks.org. We will be beginning the first publication in that series this week. I'm not going to specify the hour because, of course, all the press blacks get ready to try and spin in the other direction. Okay, so finally, so we can get on to questions, there's a lot of thank yous. I'm going to avoid 10 years worth of thank yous. Needless to say, an endeavor like WikiLeaks comes about as a result of the efforts of a great many people and institutions, common allies, love of what we're doing, and in some cases, sympathy and the thrill of doing something that's important. So I don't want to give a map of all the important people by thanking them, but that necessarily isn't a suggestion that everyone I'm about to mention is not important. So it's a mixture. First of all, the committed team of brave technicians and journalistic staff that make WikiLeaks what it is, which is an organization which has technical understanding at its core. That is our speciality, that is our comparative. Our sources, of course, without which none of this is possible. We will always keep your trust and do the best to get the best impact possible for you. We've shown over the years that we do. Our readers, supporters, and defenders who keep our mission going. A lot of staff and a lot of legal battles cost a lot of money. And it's only through the funding of our readers and supporters that we're able to keep that big ship going. Our increasingly formidable legal team, they're public, so it can be named, including Balthazar Gazon, Barry Pollack, Margaret Kunstler in the United States, Melinda Taylor, Gareth Pierce, Stella Morris, Renata Abilia, Kerry Schenkman, Jennifer Robinson, Julian Burnside, Greg Barnes, and more than 100 other lawyers in different countries, nearly all of whom work pro bono, although they're expenses. Our allies, media partners, and other defenders in hundreds of institutions and countries, especially the Center for Constitutional Rights in the United States, FFDN, Reporters Sans Frontiers, Human Rights Watch, the ACLU, and the Freedom of Press Foundation in the United States. Professor Gavin McFadden, who's in a very difficult way at the moment in terms of his health, Susan Ben and John Pilger, who should be personally thanked. The people and government of Ecuador, from the United Nations, who courageously respected my human rights despite considerable pressure over the years. The people of Germany, the Holland Foundation, Der Spiegel, the Deutsche Zeitung, the CCC, Angela and Daniel Richter, John Gertz, and there's many others who I can't mention. And last, but perhaps most significantly, those who died fighting in this business. Michael Ratner, Chief Legal Counsel, John Jones, who together with Melinda Taylor presented our UN decision. Aaron Schwartz, Lenny Weinglass, another one of our lawyers, rest in power. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Julian. So we have some time to take some questions. Yeah, sure.
There's obviously been a lot of speculation in the US that the leaks that are about to come out are going to destroy Hillary Clinton's campaign. Can you confirm or deny that?
Julian, do you want to take that one? Because I think it's the false quoting of you that's been the issue on some of this.
So
sorry. It was referring to, do we have any comment on whether the upcoming publications to do with the US elections will destroy Clinton or not?
There has been a lot of misquoting of me and WikiLeaks publications. In this particular case, the misquoting has to do with that we intend to harm Hillary Clinton, or that I intend to harm Hillary Clinton, or I don't like Hillary Clinton. All those are false. They come about as a result, principally, it seems, of Hillary Clinton's campaign and vendors trying to personalize our publications. Are upcoming publications significant in relation to the U.S. election? Yeah, we think they're significant. Do they show interesting features of U.S. power factions and how they operate? Yes, they do.
Any other questions?
Yeah, sorry, me again.
Yeah.
Julian also implied that there's been some kind of threats towards the Ecuadorian people as a result of Ecuador giving Julian asylum. Can you elaborate more on exactly what kind of pressure they're under?
Julian, do you want to? The question is, you seem to have referenced that Ecuador or the Ecuadorian people have been threatened because of the decision to give you asylum. Is that what you said, stroke meant, and can you elaborate any more?
I didn't say threatened. I said that there's significant pressure. It is, if you read the Ecuadorian press, you can see some of that in play in relation to other forms of pressure and developments in the United Kingdom, the United States, in response to our upcoming publications and the DNC leaks. Well, we have a lot of sources, and those sources are in US politics, intelligence organizations, and their equivalents in the United Kingdom. And so, yeah, we know when there are developments afoot, and we're aware of them, and we will understand them and react accordingly.
Yes?
So far during this election cycle, you focused on leaks from the DNC. Can you specify if upcoming releases, including before the election, would also affect the Republicans? Can you go that far?
That was trying to get into content of upcoming releases, re the elections. Will it also cover Republicans? I mean, we generally don't go into sort of content of releases for quite specific reasons, in that part of bringing the impact and also ensuring or trying to minimize the ability to get up a spin before we've actually gone live is one of the reasons why we keep the releases so confidential. So there are good reasons for it. I don't know if you want to elaborate any more, Julian, though, on the Republican Democrat spin that people have tried to.
There's a lot of fascinating angles there. predictable state power into an assembly of unpredictable state powers and major corporations acting more and more like states. And why that was talk back in the 1990s that the state was at an end, actually something really very different is happening now. I don't think something that could have been foreseen at that stage. So as far as WikiLeaks is concerned, the more we're in an interesting position. The more that the world globalizes and digitizes, the greater comparative advantage WikiLeaks has. Similarly, the greater the levels of censorship, including self-censorship, the greater WikiLeaks' comparative advantage is as an organization that was built legally and technically, and to a degree politically, to resist censorship.
The gentleman at the back.
My question is, you said you released 10 million documents in 10 years, which makes 3,000 documents per day average. How do you make sure that you know what you're publishing? Is there anybody who can read 3,000 documents a day? There's lots of volunteers, or how does it work?
Do you want to go with this one? Oh, sorry, you can't hear. The question is regarding the stats that we've published, of how much we've published. We say it's an average of 3,000 documents per day. How do we verify at those quantities? Do you want to talk about?
Sure. Yes, of course, that would be impossible. No, it wouldn't be impossible. It'd be very hard if we were dealing with 3,000 new sources per day. One source, one document, times 3,000. But it's a matter of verifying collections and verifying something about the source or the original source of intermediaries related to a collection of material. So we do enormous batches of in some cases, one case we did nearly 5 million documents, for example.
If I can just add as well, I think this goes back to what Julian was just referring to about how we have quite a niche within our organisation in that we have large levels of technical expertise at our core. And we have learned through our publishing model and progressing in this specialization in large archives. And they are just a different nature. There's still the same journalistic processes, RE validation, source protection, etc. But when you're talking about large archives, they're just a slightly different nature of the documents. And so your processes for validation are quite specific to working with large data sets rather than, as you say, obviously reading 3,000 individual documents a day that come from different places is quite a different type of task. Yeah, the gentleman just at the back there.
It says here, did WikiLeaks recently expose visitors to its website to malware? No. A Bulgarian researcher found hundreds of malicious files on the website. Can I just get Julian's comment on that?
Yeah, I don't know if you want to do that one, Julian, or... Oh, sorry, you can't. I keep forgetting you can't hear them. Sorry, I'm sorry. The gentleman was just asking the question about the malware, and he stated that a Bulgarian researcher has found much malicious malware on our site, and just wanted, I guess, an explanation of that one.
Well, sure. I mean, it's quite. As I said before, when WikiLeaks publishes something, you get what we publish, which is interesting. You get the reaction by the institution concerned, which is interesting. And then you get the reaction by the allies or those people sucking up to the economic or political gradient of the institution concerned. So in this particular case, the Hillary Clinton campaign has been going around saying, don't read WikiLeaks because there's malware. And spreading that quite aggressively, and her sympathizers as well. Yeah, and so people have been trying to push that. But the reality is, we are very interested in pristine sources. So WikiLeaks materials have been gone on to be used in a great many number of legal cases. So we're not interested in kind of, in censoring our materials or redacting them at all in general, but very occasionally we might redact for a limited period of time if there's some security situation involving some person, but only for a limited period of time. And the case of where, for example, in the AKP, the Turkish ruling political party of Erdogan, where we published around 200,000 of their emails from this, most of them from this year, some from the year before, but all published this year. There was malware sent to the AKP, either from criminal gangs or from state attacks on the AKP. Now that's extremely interesting, and it's not something we're going to censor. Now, does that mean that readers of WikiLeaks website are affected by that malware by reading our website? No, this is malware that targets email. That's an attachment. You can't be infected by reading our website. You have to download the attachments, an exe, and then open it on your desktop and ignore the warnings, etc. Just like downloading any information on any website. If you play it that way, there's a chance you'll get it. Malware, just like malware can be in your email box as well.
There's some other questions. Yep.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask a little bit more about the changes that you signaled in the way that WikiLeaks is structured, and if you can just go into that, and is it the financial pressure primarily that's driving you, or what is behind those changes, and what kind of timetable for that to all be announced?
So the changes in structure, the lady was asking a question about the changes in structure you were talking about. I don't know if they were, you would describe them as changes in structure or just sort of increase, but she was wanted to know any more about these, and particularly the donation side that you'd referred to, and what the timescale is on these changes to take place of the upcoming more organizational changes rather than just publications.
Well, I mean, some of these things are immediate. As I said, our effort to build a very sizable community and bring in the public as a task force to analyze, amplify our publications, and to defend us against what is a really quite remarkable McCarthyist push in the United States at the moment, principally by Hillary Clinton's allies, because she happens to be the person being exposed at the moment. If you're talking about our structural change in terms of membership system that we've produced similar to FAS, that's being rolled out now. We have an internal beta. It's something that will occur over the remainder of the year. We hope to have it, the membership sign-up system done in about 30 days.
Person back there?
Yes, just a question in regards to the legal situation. We've seemingly gone through a lot of different avenues. Can you shed any light on perhaps what comes next, and perhaps how confident you may be of resolving the legal situation at the moment?
Legal, are you talking about sort of with the US grand jury? Are you talking?
Julian's situation in the embassy.
There's a question about your personal legal situation within the embassy and what's possible next for you in your case. You hear me?
What's the question?
Oh. What's next for you in your personal legal situation there at the embassy?
Well, I mean, it's all politics, right? The law is clear. The UN has ruled on the matter. The United Kingdom is not only has discarded the EU, and of course there's good and bad things about the EU. It is committed, the government is committed, and it's said so repeatedly, it is going to withdraw its Human Rights Act. It's going to scrap the UK Human Rights Act and attempt to either completely withdraw from the European Court of Human Rights or substantially withdraw the impact of the European Court of Human Rights. So it's, I'm in a country that doesn't follow the law.
Yes?
In context of some of the things we've seen on the WikiLeaks Twitter account, does Julian feel some affinity of some kind to Donald Trump? What's the connection?
Sorry, it's just very funny when you know him. Do you feel any affinity with Donald Trump? This is in the context of some of the tweets, and I suppose this accusation that you're for Trump because against Clinton is the accusation that people try to make. And so the question was, in the context of this and our Twitter feed, do you feel any personal affinity with Trump?
You need to, the mic's a bit muffled, so you need to speak clearly.
Do you feel any personal affinity with Trump?
With Trump?
And that was the question, yes.
It's an interesting question. I feel personal affinity, really, I think, with all human beings. You can, through understanding someone and what drives them, you can feel sorry for them. I certainly feel sorry for Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. That's a kind of human sympathy. These are two people that are tormented by their ambitions in different ways.
Any other questions? Yeah, just at the back there, gentlemen.
If you could provide a rough timetable for the next or the first election week, or actually when the first election week might come.
So this is talking about, you were explaining there's a number of different publications coming up. Are you able to give any more specificity on when one specifically to do with the elections will be coming? I know you've said there'll be several over the next weeks.
I think the statement I made was clear, that our first publications in the series are this week. I haven't said whether US election related or not. I would like to keep that ambiguity, but we have quite a pace ahead of us.
Yeah, so.
Could you ask him to clarify his comment about how Brexit may change his legal status? I didn't quite understand whether you were saying it's an opportunity or potentially a risk.
Yep, sure. Can you just do a quick clarification on your Brexit statement and that this could have changes for your legal case? Did you mean that specifically more as an opportunity or as a risk for your legal case?
Well, the Brexit is a slight risk in relation to there no longer be appeals to the European Courts of Justice. So there's certain avenues that are cut off there. On the other hand, I mean, I have a lot of legal cases. So we have the US case, and the UK is sticking prominent tonight with the US extradition warrant will be landed in the UK. We have the UK bail case, which they're trying to arrest me over seeking asylum in the first place, which of course is completely illegal, but they're attempting to do it anyway. And we have the Swedish extradition warrant, which there's no charges for. So that in relation to the Swedish extradition warrant, which is an enormous rhetorical problem, and is used by the UK rhetorically to justify, although not legally, that is going to face increasing political and legal difficulties. So the UK has said that it is going to grandfather in all existing EU law and then start knocking it out. But the abuses of the EAW, including by Sweden and including in my case, were one of the things that drove the UK at an intellectual level in terms of its sovereignty debate out of the European Union. And those there were significant debates about the abuses of the EAW in Parliament. So I would be surprised if the EAW is not significantly attacked as a result of things like extradition without charge in the UK Parliament as the transition occurs.
Yeah.
I asked before about why the announcement wasn't made yesterday on the balcony. It wasn't quite answered.
Oh yes, sorry, he came on halfway through. Well, we could just ask. Yeah, the question is regarding, can you give any further information on the reason you had to cancel your speech in London later today? Security was given, but do you have anything else you can add?
Yes, we received information. That meant that the people involved in doing the security for the event believed that it shouldn't be done.
Any other questions? One last one there. Yep.
Maybe just a question about his personal situation now, living there for 4 years in the embassy. How is he in the moment, physically? How he feels there?
How are you after 4 years in the embassy? How do you feel sort of physically? You look all right to us.
A bit pale. A bit pale. A bit pale. Actually, I was thinking the other night, it'd be pretty interesting for vitamin D researchers, right? Because it's pretty rare that you have a subject that hasn't seen the sun in 4 years, but is otherwise healthy. There's a few people who are in hospitals, for example, that are bedridden, can't move, that very rarely see the sun. I suppose they build them out occasionally, but and there's some space station people. I don't know if they've arranged for some there, but it's quite rare that you have an otherwise healthy-ish person. I have some other problems from being in the embassy, but these are not diabetes or something like that.
One last question.
What can Americans do to support WikiLeaks now that it's been polarized as every American supporting them as a communist? Red on the bed, I prefer. Down in the bed.
There was a question specifically in relation to the propaganda attacks that we receive, and particularly from the US. And in that sort of context, do you have any advice for our supporters from America who may sort of feel pressures for them to be maligned, etc., because of their support?
Robustly engage with it. It's I love it. These propaganda attacks, they're so amazing. They're pathetic and laughable in all sorts of cases and dangerous in others, but they're so revelatory of the different associations in power between different groups. So you should really see them as an opportunity to understand who's aligned with who and how social and political conformism works. It's a very accelerated process, and so one is able to see it unfolding in real time. In terms of combating it, there was some of you may not know, but there was an incredible front page story of the New York Times a few weeks ago, in 2 interior pages about us, with no facts in the story at all. The only fact, or alleged, the only news in the story was that the US government said they couldn't find a connection between us and Russia. That was the only fact. But the whole story was actually angled the other way, to have incidences, not even bizarre, absurd claims, coincidences, such as that I started speaking and campaigning about ROJ TV, which is the largest Kurdish language TV station, or at least